Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Game, a Pax8 show where we and our cybersecurity experts discuss the latest innovations and threats in cybersecurity. I'm Rob Barnes, your on-air Pax8 producer, and I'll be joined today with Pax8's own Matt Lee and Dom Kirby, and a special guest, Wes Spencer, to cover ransomware attacks committed by cyber criminals and how cyber insurance can protect you and your business. Be sure to like and subscribe down below, and even leave a comment if you feel so inclined. And join us every Friday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And without further ado, let's jump into this week's news with Matt and Dom.
All right, welcome back, friends. We're here. We're ready to go over some news articles. We got some great guests with us today. But the first article I'd like to talk about, and I don't know if everybody saw this, and this was actually a call out from a friend of ours on LinkedIn. And they were saying, listen, LockBit ransomware gang. So if you remember LockBit, they've come and gone over the years to some extent. They've faded in and out. But LockBit 3.0 releasing, they came out with their message of make ransomware great again. And what was really interesting and unique in this, and I think, we're going to bring on some guests to talk about this too, is that they announced a bug bounty program. Now, if you followed me at all on LinkedIn or in any of my social medias, you know I'm a big believer in vendors having a bug bounty program, a methodology for people to find flaws and allow them to be fixed and be compensated for their time. Dom, initial thoughts on this one?
I kind of love it. I'm not going to lie. It's new and different. I mean, obviously it's for the wrong cause. For me, it sort of proves that these organizations function like a business, unlike a business that develops software. And they are. They make a lot of money at it, albeit
Right.
They make it in the wrong ways. They are essentially more mature than a lot of developers out there right now. So it's a little bit terrifying, but it's, the cynical side of me kind of loves it. It's very innovative,
Yeah.
for the criminal
Well,
space.
and I'd like to, Rob, if you don't mind working on getting our special guest on for us too, because I'd love to hear your take on it. I thought it was quite unique, and we'll bring Wes back on later in the show for this. But I'd like to get your take on this, Wes. You have a bug bounty program established by LockBit 3.0, and they're asking for some unique stuff, which I'll go over here in just a minute. But what are your thoughts?
It's creative, isn't it, Matt? Like you see this, and I think Jake Williams, Malware Jake, had tweeted out when this came out. He's like, "Why is this better than most Fortune 500 bug bounty programs?" Which I think is funny.
Right.
But I think if you back up and you look at the statistics, this past quarter we were down 34% average ransomware payments from quarter four of last year. So what we're seeing, the glass half full, is we're actually, I'm not going to say winning, but we're making progress in the fight, which is causing threat actors to have to get a little bit more creative, and a bug bounty is a way to do it.
Yeah. You touch on a point, Wes, that I just hadn't thought about, but ransomware payments are dropping for a lot of reasons, for having better backups, more awareness, better protections, better guidance from their internal incident response, insurance company pressures, OFAC list pressures. You have tons and tons and tons of things coming together for this. And I hadn't actually attributed that being that, like Dom said, as a business, they're going to shift. Pivot's going to pivot. And they're going to continue to shift. Let me talk about what's included in this bug bounty program for everybody that's listening. They want to pay for website bugs, right? So things they can immediately make money on. Cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, or XSS, which I will define as cross-site scripting, so I don't have to hear our producer jump in and make sure I don't use 3 letters, right? Yep, I'm working on it, Rob, working on it. Website bugs, they want locker bugs, so they're really looking for whether it be other type of containerization methodology, encryption stuff, decryptors. They want brilliant ideas. They went so broad as to just say, hey, if you got a good idea, we'll pay you for it. Right? How many bug bounty programs have you seen, Wes or Dom, where they're very, very, very restrictive? They want very certain things. And here you have them saying, we'll pay you for a good idea. So maybe we're on the wrong side of the law.
They don't want to spend money, right? The companies that launch bug bounty programs. A lot of them are very disingenuous, right? They say that they have a bug bounty program. So they have a bug bounty program. You can get paid for one bug type in one environment, and then you can't touch any other environment. These guys can do whatever they want. So, yeah, I mean, brilliant ideas. Now, the legal ramifications of giving them a brilliant idea and being compensated for it are questionable. That's
Matt, the one I
Right,
thought was
fair.
most interesting is them giving $1 million if you can dox the founder of LockBit. So he's basically like, all you got to do is say my first and last name in
That's
a
it.
secure message, and I'll pay you $1 million. Now, who knows if they'll do it or not? But I thought that was pretty interesting too. I guess that's his like, I better run for the hills if someone actually knows me.
You know what? That's a canary methodology, isn't it? You've actually just defined his canary.
I gotta say, I jumped in and I wrote in Matt Lee, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Uh-oh.
I need to go do something, gents. I'll be back in just a second. No, but you're right. Like, if you think about this, they know they're living on that space. And interesting enough, they actually said, doxing for other PII, PHI things, but very specifically said $1 million in Bitcoin or Monero. So he's even willing to give a either or. Yeah, it's almost like reinsurance for them on not getting arrested, right? Like, if I've made some OPSEC failure that's going to create Wes's ability to find out Matt Lee's the guy, then Matt Lee will know that the FBI can follow the same suit, and they're probably just a couple of days behind. Like, that's, gosh, Wes, that's, you know what? That's why we keep the big brains around us, man. 100%. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But the point is that if you are living in a belief that our threats are static and that the things that these threat actors are going to do are going to stay the same, you're kind of still behind the times in the understanding that they will pivot, right? It's a business. They're there to make profitability, and they will pivot in that business action. Rob, let's go ahead and bring us to the next news article. And Dom, if you want to kind of get us into this conversation.
Oh, I don't like this one. I stay at the Marriott quite a bit. So Marriott has been breached for the third time, although maybe it's the fourth time or sixth time. There's a lot going on out there. Marriott got breached for the third time, and that for me is pretty much the summation of it. Like, I'm pretty displeased. I got a lot of Marriott points I'd like to not lose, and I'd like to take advantage of and feel safe doing so. It's, if this happens to you twice, like, I start to have questions about your operational capability. But it is totally possible to get, unlucky twice. Like, it happens.
Sure.
Different vector you haven't hit. But 3 times.
How you feel about that third time? Yes.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask.
Yeah, three times, there's a limit in my feeling bad for you as a business. And they found it. I don't know. I don't know what this even speaks to. It's obviously a lack of improvement, right? And maybe it's a lack of understanding the impact. I don't really know. But Marriott has a lot of properties. Like, I don't think people realize how many different brands sit under Marriott globally. It's a lot of hotels, right?
Yeah.
It's like MGM. They're very ubiquitous. They're everywhere. You just don't necessarily know that you're at a Marriott property.
Imagine trying to attract talent as a CISO for a company that has been through 3, 4, 5 breaches. If I'm the person you're talking to, in my heart, I have to believe that the board does not understand it. The tech debt is too large. The things that are preventing any forward progression aren't moving forward. So let's ask a celebrity CISO, right? We have one with us, thankfully. So Wes, you're applying for a job, and a headhunter has brought you to some unnamed organization that's massive and global, and you find that it's Marriott. How does that feel? What are your thoughts coming in as a CISO? And then if you take the job, what the hell do you do?
Yeah, I mean, we're in this era now. We saw this with the Uber breach, that while back, where there was, a whole bunch of like, are we going to see an indictment against the CEO and the CISO? We were close to this,
and
right? We're in that era.
We have the CISO last week. Yeah.
We're
that just changed.
We're going to start seeing this, and we're going to have to be really concerned, thinking through what's the actual executive support I have behind this company that I'm going to, and what's going to happen when something hits the fan, and how are we going to brush this under the rug? Are we going to be forthright about it and handle this in the right way? These are things that CISOs have to think about. If I'm a CFO, I just worry about, no laundering, no collusion, none of that stuff. I'm good to go. But a CISO's job now has really changed to where there's a lot of legal overhead to your job. And that's a pretty scary thing.
And some quite personal legal overhead too, right, Wes? In the sense that as a CISO, we make this allusion to the, previous Uber breach, which was many years ago now. I think it's 3-4 years ago at this point. And just now, the Department of Justice has come back and said, we're tacking on additional fraud charges to you as a personal human entity, not as Uber. And so I think, to your point, like, this is the kind of stuff where people ask what the cost of a breach is like this, and people ask what the cost of this is. at some point you absolutely have no ability to hire the talent you need to get out of the hole you're in. I would have a hard time taking personal legal responsibility to go somewhere where I know that they have a track record of these type of events, they have a track record of not solving it, at least obviously, right?
Right.
From the outside looking in. And I think the biggest thing on this that was for me, I was doing this court case thing last night for Flagstar Bank about their kind of challenge, and prosecuting attorney and mitigating circumstances by defense really just brought up the fact that there is nothing legally that's going to happen to them in most cases, and that they can continue to do this over and over and over. And that has to and is changing. And I think that's kind of the interesting point about this, and why I wanted to highlight this article. Even though it's really not all that materially direct to us day to day, the data has already been leaked a few times, right?
Right.
But it does show that historic piece, right?
Well, you know what's interesting too is the vector, right? And this one, it's a classic vector, and I want to feel a little bit of sympathy about it, but it has to, again, by the third time, you're clearly not addressing things comprehensively. And I'm going to pull up the article so I don't misquote it. So it's an unnamed hacking group, roughly 20 gigabytes of data, including credit card data, stolen from an employee at BWI Airport, Marriott in Baltimore. But it was a social engineering attack, right? It was involved the hackers. The vector involved the hackers tricking a Marriott associate and giving access to the associate's computer through social engineering. Now, it doesn't go into whether it was remote. I would imagine it was remote and not some, Ocean's 11 in-person attack.
Sure.
But so there's clearly a lack of training and probably a lack of controls around. Can I get on a
principles of least privilege?
Download an application, right? Like,
I'm going to go get 20 gigs of database data. Like that's ridiculous, right? I mean, the point is that there has to be failures in principles.
And I'm going to
allow
a remote access tool to run on the machine, whatever they use, right? Is another thing. It doesn't make any sense.
Not to cast stones in a glass house, but go ahead, Wes.
I will say, doesn't it feel like it's 2012 all over again? You remember when like the hack du jour was like these big compromises of these big companies, and then all your data is stolen, and everyone was like in such a tizzy about it to happen over and over and over. And then Equifax was like the heat of it, and once
14,
everything was lost from Equifax, we're all like, whatever, we don't even care anymore. And then now we go to ransomware, and now there's a financial payout. So it's a much more significant news item. And so I see this, and I think most people just skim by it because like, oh yeah, that's like old school stuff. It's like we've seen this years and years ago.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Wes. And I feel like the desensitization is also kind of part of the problem, right? I think you have this almost, well, it didn't impact me, so what's the real cost of this, right? And unless you've been personally identity theft or personally targeted in some of those spaces, you just don't have that direct feeling and correlation to it. And so I think it's good to highlight. I really wanted to highlight this.
I mean, I feel it. I've got cards saved with them. So, I mean,
fair. Yeah. I wonder why we start getting credit. And really, though, the banks feel it. And what that then translates to is higher interest rates. That then translates into higher fraud losses. I mean, this is, this does have a real impact on you as a human, but, not to trivialize. So let's bring up that last article for me, if you will, please. And we're going to get into that. But, we talk about how threat actors are playing on this understanding of MSPs, and MSPs is a force multiplier. What I mean by a force multiplier is, if I could go and chase down Wes's little company somewhere and get into that company, it's one access to one company of which I have varying degrees of return. If I could go access Dom's MSP when he was an MSP, I now had X number of companies that I had direct access to. I had an RMM that I could run code on. I had access to their spam filtering capabilities so I can drop them. I gain a lot of things from that force multiplier. Well, it typically starts big and it hits the news big. And in this case, we look at SHI. SHI is I think, I don't want to quote it wrong from a size perspective, but they were a $12.5 billion revenue MSP, mainly focused on the MSP government and public sector space, $12.3 billion, 5,000 employees. And what I wanted to highlight on this, and Dom, you're the one that called it out when we first talked, right? Was this is Uber-esque. They first posted, we're doing system maintenance. They legitimately, during an
Everything's
active
fine,
and
guys.
known
Just working on
attack-
something.
Yeah, don't worry. Look somewhere else,
Fine.
please. Everything's fine. It
blew my
just
mind.
blows my mind. Yeah, yeah. But I would ask this question to you if you're an MSP listening. How many of you have an incident response plan? How many of you have a plan of exactly what you're going to do when this hits? What are your comms going to be? Who's going to comm it? How's it going to be commed? What are your external plans? What are you going to respond to when they call? And I would say, as I point a finger at SHI and make this understanding of this really sucks, and I think the response may not have met muster, I would say I'd caution each of us as MSPs and as practitioners in this space to look inward as a result of this. And it's not about whether or not you're going to get compromised. It's about what you do when you do. And for your first webpage to say, just doing maintenance, homies, I feel like that might be a bit disingenuous, right? So what are your thoughts, Wes?
Well, I think you're right. And let's just play the total innocent card for a minute. Like, let's just pretend that SHI had that, like, whoever put that notice up was just like a web dev that didn't even know there was a ransomware attack. This goes directly to your point, Matt, of like, this is why we practice good incident response. We have good communication across the org because we live in an era in which everything is saved forever. Nothing is gone. And so even if it was a totally innocent mistake by an unknowing user who put that in there, it shows a lack of, I would say, good incident response process that is clear in how we externally communicate. We lack this often. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see in the aftermath, especially the near hours aftermath of a breach, is poor communication and lack thereof. And I think that leads to a lot of these things. Just add fuel to the fire, add confusion, potentially can even add legal hot water by the things you say or don't say through that miscommunication. We can't understate that.
We teach a class about that, right? And we go over incidences versus the B word, which is breach. Don't get excited. But
different B word.
When to break out that word, right? Because if you break it out too soon, you're now claiming that something happened that may not have happened, that legally has a lot of ramifications that maybe the I word of incident doesn't, because we have incidents all the time. You should be dealing with incidents all the time. At least you either have incidents you don't know about or you're dealing with incidents. That's okay, right? But as soon as you break out that breach word, things change, especially if you're in a regulated industry.
Glad you brought that up, Wes and Dom. Like, I can't overstate this, really. You know, I serve on this volunteer response corps program through CompTIA that's going to be releasing here soon. And one of the first things we talk about is don't say breach. Once you make something that, you have some degree of legal culpability that exists as a result of that. And it really is this, our biggest instruction we want to give someone in the middle of one of these incidents where it's something that's really this cataclysmic for them is, your job is not to be the person on the stand that gets cross-examined of whether or not this was a breach, whether this was a material touch of information that had regulatory or otherwise controls around it or things around it. And so I think the point is that we don't want to use breach, and we want to use incident unless someone else calls it a breach.
I think you need to be a member of a bar to say the breach word is kind of my opinion, right? Like call it an incident, take the facts to the person with the JD and let them figure out what to do with it, right? Incident. Call it an incident.
Dom,
please.
I was just going to ask, if you're there to protect those toy boxes behind you, was that an incident when your child came and took a toy out of there, or was that a documented access request that was already approved?
He's pre-approved. You know, he's
okay, good.
Just want
to make sure ACLs were in place, man.
I'm actually really jealous that he got that pre-approved thing because I don't have that, and I want the toys behind you. Do you know what I'm saying?
I can only get the toys through PIM and PAM solutions. I've got to escalate privilege to do that for some reason.
I didn't even know there was a process involved. No one told me anything.
Right.
It's fantastic, man. No, I think though I don't want to publicly shame SHI. That's not my intent here. I think that there are, but for the grace of God go I. One of the concepts that I loved to live when I was at my former MSP was we had this thing I called live compromised. And it was just this understanding that every single minute at any single time, someone at a certain scale will be compromised. If I have 1,000 employees, at some point, 2 of them at any given time were probably compromised, which gets into those same failures I said about Marriott, in the sense that if you think live compromised, then you have to do things to try to reduce the blast radius, right? You have to try to make it to where when Wes inadvertently in his flu-riddled self one day out in the airport or something, leaves his laptop unlocked, and someone takes advantage of that, how much can they get into? What damage can they do? What checks and balances exist to find those anomalies, right? And some of those kind of concepts would come into for example, we might let you be an admin and delete all, a machine out of Intune. You cannot delete 5 or more, right? And so you start getting into these, methodologies of limiting that blast radius, and that can come at the cost of business productivity, right? So you have to kind of balance those things. But I think the point is
I have
that
an interesting recent story on that though. So my corporate machine recently got swapped out, right? And then we took my old one and issued it to one of my downlines. Some process didn't happen and didn't get deleted from Intune. So, however many days later, I'm getting pinged like, hey, your device is not compliant. It's like, cool, I don't have that machine. And it wasn't like, cool, I'll delete it. It was, okay, hold on. They went back and dug through the tickets and they made sure that is indeed what happened. They made sure they found the new Intune match. It's nice. Those little processes like that. Because I could have just said, yeah, that machine, whatever.
I don't have any more. Who cares?
Yeah. just doing spooky stuff on that old machine over here. Right. So they consider the potential threat of that machine potentially still being out there doing stuff that, it's those little things make a huge difference. And frankly, there's probably a point in my career, if that happened to me, I totally would have put a page up that said, yeah, we're cleaning up some dust. Don't worry.
There would have been a time in my career too. 100%. Yeah. And I think this goes all the way back to Wes's point about the ransomware gangs. I don't mind talking about how poorly I behaved in the past, because my goal in life was to find those things, iterate upon them, and be better, which means being humble and transparent and learning. And I think the irony, the sweet irony of this is that to Wes's just exposition of this conversation, the threat actors are humble. They are saying, we need this. We are taking losses. We need to have extra help. We need you guys to give us, let's just put that in perspective, that the other side's doing it. How are we not doing those things? Right. And so I don't ever poke at people's past. Let's look at the future. Let's be better.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think, to this point, when we start talking about cyber risk and we kind of are where we are, at some point we'll want to jump over and have a conversation about insurance. But Rob, what's next for us? I want to stay on out of trouble with you.
So actually, we have a really unique situation here where we've provided some content to show just how the average person really knows their acronyms. So I think we'll move over to that if you guys are interested.
Yeah, I'd love to see this.
All right, great. Let's do it.
This is going to be good.
OIDC? I don't know.
Oh, Lordy, no idea.
Dude, I know that I don't know it.
I think it's like a insurance company, or maybe it's a skin disease.
Hold on, SDLC. So bad. Service Department Learning Center. Software Development Lifecycle.
Security, detection, something.
I know this. Software Development Lifecycle. Nailed it.
Let's go.
IDOR.
I smell bad. I odor.
Indestructible destruction of returns.
I have no idea. Multi-factor authentication. Ooh, I got one. Multi-factor authentication. Boom.
2 for 2.
Multi-factor authentication.
3 for 3.
Factor authentication.
Oh man.
EDI.
Perfect game.
I don't know.
Endpoint detection and response.
Brooke for the win.
Clearly, elephant dance retrospective.
Endpoint detection and response. Pass.
No, that's awesome. Right, Rob? So that's so good. I want to thank all the Pax8 employees that participated in this. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no, honestly, that was a ton of fun to make, and we're looking at finding more of you out there. So start testing your acronyms, all of you who are watching right now. It's going to get real.
Well, and I want to introduce this part of our show, right? Because that's something we're going to start being held to. Rob is the smartest person I know and the least experienced in cybersecurity that I know. So
That's
I think it's
actually
perfect. Yeah, no, win-win, right? It means that there's a computer there, but it's just not loaded with any operating system around this.
Okay.
So you're going to start stopping us as we use acronyms and breaking in and making us actually define them if you don't know them. You're our barometer for our audience. If you don't know a term, Dom's got to he's got to define it.
I'm all about it. Yeah, let's set that up. We'll call it the acronym alert. Okay, so if
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know
awesome,
something that
dude.
you guys are talking about, I'm gonna stop you and be like, "Slow down, y'all. Speak some human to me right now,
Yeah.
because y'all are talking robot."
All right, awesome. I'm down. That sounds great. Okay, so thank you for that. We obviously want to educate in this show. We're hoping to make sure that people understand more and more. OpenID Connect is the same thing as OAuth technically. It is your single sign-on protocol that you would use to sign on with your identity. It's a successor to SAML, if you will, security account markup language. I might have that wrong, so I may have failed.
Assertion markup language.
Assertion markup language. Thank you. But we will be going through those and trying to help teach some of those. I'm stupid happy that all of our people got MFA. That made me very, very
That's
happy.
an important one. That's the one. If they were going to get all of them once, that was the one, you know.
So we're talking about cybersecurity, ransomware, business email compromise, loss, these type of things. And earlier when we talked about the LockBit 2.0 change and SHI targeting MSPs, when you start talking about cybersecurity, you talk about risk. That's really what you're talking about, is risk. And what I wanted to talk about today, and we brought Wes Spencer on, is when you have done the things to mitigate the risk, when you've put in controls, when you've hardened your environments, when you've used principles of least privilege, when you've put in those type of controls, there is still residual risk. That's always the case. I would lie if I ever said we got to a point where there's no more cyber risk and we're done. Now, ironically, did get into a fight with Kaspersky's CEO on LinkedIn the other day because they made a cyber immune gateway, and put it up on LinkedIn. And so it's turned into a really fun conversation. But that said, there's always risk. And what do we do with residual risk in every other case in business? We insure it, right? And we drive some of that risk off to be held by someone else to insure that risk. So Wes, you are now partnering with Fifth Wall. I just saw you came over there, and you and I've had a lot of conversations in the past about cyber insurance, but kind of introduce what you think is going on in cyber insurance as you see it today. And we'll just get into a great conversation from here for that. Uh-oh.
There we go. I think most of us know why we need cyber insurance.
Hey, that one wasn't on me.
think
Sorry to interrupt you, Wes. Guys, I'm excited. That one was not on me.
No,
that one was not on me.
Awesome.
Now that the cat's out of the bag, I keep going on mute to cough and stuff. This is my second day of COVID, just to spill all my personal health information guts live on the show. But yeah, I left the mute on. It's my fault.
I'm just really happy it wasn't me, Wes. Thank you.
100%.
Well,
I'll take the blame on that. Yeah,
I'll speak to that.
We'll
though.
see how
Thank
long
you
the
for
meds
being
last.
here. Yeah, I was gonna say thank you for being here, even though you're sick, right? Like that's what a commitment to
For real.
cybersecurity this guy has, right? Like
Yeah.
major points there from me.
Putting
Sorry,
on a
go ahead,
smile
Wes.
and acting like I'm coherent here. Yeah. So they may mute me again based on where things go with this whole conversation, right? So yeah, appreciate that. So here's what I think about all this. We've known that cyber insurance is such a big deal. We know that you see what happens post breach. You see average cost of a ransomware attack being close to $1 million, right? When you count outages, recovery cost. Hopefully you don't pay the
Hours
ransom,
of your
but many cases we do.
humans, all of those things. Yeah, 100%.
So we know it's a huge deal. But here's the problem, Matt. The problem is we're seeing loss ratios anywhere from 40 to 100%, which is staggering when it comes to just insurance as a whole.
Definition. When you talk about loss ratios for insurance, what is a traditional loss ratio that's acceptable for an insurance company, right? What's their profitability need to be in those ratios, just to help people understand how bad that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna differ, across, what you're offering, what it is. But I'd say 10, 15, 20% loss ratios would be a lot better and far more standard than you're going to see. Can you imagine being 70 to 100% loss ratio? I mean, the margins there are so razor thin. Most cases, it doesn't exist. It's unbelievable.
True story. Yeah, I mean, you start thinking about life insurance, you start thinking about things in that normal actuarial basis, and they have extremely predictable loss ratios. They know that 15% of cars might enter into a wreck that's totaling and causing that, but they don't for cyber, right? Like, I think that is kind of one of the challenges. So let's get back into the story, but loss ratios are setting the stage, right? These insurance companies have made products. They are not making money. If anything, they may be losing money on a lot of them. And they are paying. I mean, we're seeing some shift in that, but they have been paying these claims. So let's keep walking forward in that journey there, Wes. I didn't mean to cut you off. I get excited.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. This is what I'd much rather chat about it. So what's that led to, right? When it's been like Oprah for 3 or 4 years, we're like, you get cyber insurance, you get cyber insurance, you get cyber insurance. Things, that you reap what you sow. I mean, you could make an argument of was there some greed out there? I don't know that it was greed as much as a total misunderstanding by the carriers of just how dangerous this was. And when they were designing a lot of these packages and in thinking through how do we assess cybersecurity, it was, do you have AV and a firewall? Oh, you're a small business. No one cares about you. And then, of course, we see what happens in 2017 and 18 and beyond. And so they're playing a catch-up game here. And Matt, I will tell you this, it's staggering to me. In the back of my mind, I think these data nerds, like insurance people are data nerds. You just mentioned actuarial stuff. I mean, I can tell you if you're this gender, if you drive this car, if you live in this area, if you all these things, I can tell you exactly how much you're going to cost on average. In cyber, we don't have that. We still don't have that today. And that's what leads us into this. Go ahead.
And the data they have is based on lies. Normally, when you measure blood pressure, you use a sphygmomanometer and you have a pressure and you know what that pressure is on that vessel wall.
Did you practice that word before the show?
Yeah. No, I'm just a nerd. But the point is that they have a blood pressure measuring methodology. When we talk about something as loose as even applying EDR, let's say I check the box and say I applied EDR. What the hell does that even mean? What are the efficacy rates? Yeah. What's the data that's there? What's protected? What's the risk? How is their other posture? What other controls do they, right? And so we have so many of these other challenges that we wouldn't have in normal actuarial data, that we have tons of bodies of data we can trust, that we know accident data for the last 100 years, that we know, right? We have these kind of like real empirical things compared to very soft data sets, in my opinion, around the cybersecurity efficacy by just even checking the box. So
it's so to your point, complicated, right? Like I just advised not long ago on a case. They got ransomware. They had a certain particular EDR product deployed. Doesn't matter which one. And they're like, how did this happen? Well, it was in learning mode. Like they've literally told it not to do anything. It did indeed throw an alert that ransomware had done its thing. So it succeeded at its mission, but they never told it to do anything about it. Right. So like the subcheck box would be like, is it on? Like,
so yeah, right. You have it. Are you using it? Like, no, check the for real box 5 times. For real? No, man, come on. For real. Yeah. So that's another stage setter, right? Is this the actuarial problem around cybersecurity today? And cost you mentioned as well, right? This is unknown cost piece.
Yeah. And so what that's led to is you throw all of these things in the cauldron, what comes out is a really hard market. And that word hard market, what we're talking about is the sense that you talk to small businesses and they say, why did the cost of my insurance go up 2 to 3 times from last year to this year when I haven't changed any controls and I've made no claims? Why is it that I was doing all of these same things last year and I filled out the same exact questionnaire doing the same exact things and this time you rejected me? Why is it that, all of a sudden everything seems to be different? Everything seems to be like really, really, really in upheaval and there's no consistency across the board. That's what happens in a hard market where you have insurance carriers that pull back and some say, I'm just done with this industry. MSPs are a good example of that. You see a total pullback. If you're an MSP, I'm out. And then others even say, fine, we'll insure you, but your costs are going to be so high, you're probably just going to say no. And so that's what leads to this upheaval right now.
Yeah, you're seeing, and so it's to your point when you're saying, the markets are hardening, right? There's a lot of examples of that happening, but it's essentially an attempt to get their loss ratios up, right, and get them down to a reasonable level. Because if you can't control the loss, which we can't control, then you can control the volume with which you're comparing the loss to the monies coming in, and that means you have to now be more selective and also increase the price for those classes of insureds. And I think that's the other point. There isn't a class of insureds. Even the delineations, so when you're talking about insurance in general, the attempt is to shift them into classes of insureds. A great example with life insurance would be, do they smoke? Are they overweight? Those create classes of insureds that allow them to have bands of that coverage cost make up so that this one can be more expensive because we know the average cost of cancer is going to be more than if Matt gets hit by a truck or falls out of a car or something, right? And so you I guess, I'm making a little bit of a guess there, but the point is we don't have classes of insureds in our world. Yeah. What's the difference in the cost? And so I think to what Wes was saying is that's why we're seeing these rampant increases in cost. But in addition, we're also seeing these increases of the restrictions. Like you're starting to see co-insurance on a ransomware payment. So now you're saying, okay, if it's a $250,000 payment, it's still only going to be $250,000 at 80%. You're going to pay the other 20, and you'll have to pay this 40,000 with us when we pay our 210 or whatever it may be. And so you're seeing that as a hardening market. And I think, without like talking about the downsides of this, insurance has done more for cybersecurity in the last year than any other thing I've ever seen, period. Right? Just because of that exact one-to-one business correlation of,
executives
it used to be 20,000.
Like I run a business. I wanted to insure everything I could possibly insure. Right? Stub my toe and late and lose the contract, insured, right? Like I wanted to insure everything. So business owners get that, and executives understand that risk has to be insured. So they want to insure all risks, including cyber risk. So if you're an insurance carrier, particularly if you're a big one or a group of them, if you ratchet up your requirements, then the business, it sort of increases the call in the boardroom, right? Because they want that insurance. Insurance is very valuable to a business. So that suddenly they'll do it. And that's why the influence is there and the change is there.
Yeah. Yeah, Dom, you're exactly right. So let me share a little story that just, it's an anecdote, but it's exactly right. I'm going to end up doing a talk one day about like calling your baby ugly. And what I mean by that is I've jumped on a whole bunch of calls with Fifth Wall of late where it's like me, it's, and keep in mind, Fifth Wall is a broker. So we have access to like 35 plus carriers. And so we're in the middle of helping those relationships. Right. And so I'm sitting on behalf of Fifth Wall with the agent and then the end user, the insured, in some cases, and MSPs on the call too. And I remember sitting on one, it was a really large manufacturer. Well, not like, I think they were like not really large, maybe 200 to 300 million in revenue. So not small, right? Not a joke, not a tiny little company. And I'm sitting here and I'm calling their baby ugly. Like I'm explaining to them why they got denied ransomware coverage. So like you don't have multi-factor for all your users. You've never done patching and you don't do vulnerability scanning. I could go on and on of things that they weren't doing. But here's what's interesting, Dom. The CEO was on the call. And at the end, the CEO jumps in. He's like, hey, I just want you guys to know this. We're sorry. This will not happen again. And we're going to take this really seriously because we understand. He's like, I'm worried for our company. And I'm hearing it. I'm like, this is one of the first times I've ever heard a CEO take the ownership and the oops and this is serious to me because it's business risk. And that's what it took.
I hadn't had this thought before you said this, Wes, and this is interesting because think about your normal life. When can you not get insured? It's usually when there is nothing but the outcome that's going to happen.
Yeah,
what I mean by that is
5 DUIs and 3 or 4 alcohol accidents. And,
Are you guys talking about me right now?
Sorry, Rob, we're trying not to.
You're not
being
sharing my life story, are you? I'm just kidding.
Shh, we're okay. We're good. No, but think about it. If you couldn't get insurance because you're uninsurable, the conversation comes in. If I have a terminal disease and I want to buy insurance, I'm not insurable in the traditional sense. There's other methods maybe, but I'm not insurable. And when you don't have insurability and you've lost this insurable interest and you have that situation, it tells you something, right? It tells you something. So as a business owner being rejected for insurance, it's like being told there is such a high probability of this happening to you. We're not willing to put our cards on the table with you. Right. And calling someone's babies ugly is kind of saying it looks like terminal cancer, unfortunately. And you have all the factors that say you're not going to succeed. We're not going to insure you. Or if we are going to insure you, we're going to try to insure you with a cost that's commensurate to what you would have spent 1-to-1 on an event. Right. And so that's why you get these $70,000 quotes and $50,000 quotes for insurance. It's because they're saying we think it's going to cost $50,000 because you're going to have an event soon. Like, let's just let that sink in. So I think to your point, Wes, and we'll come back to you, is I think this is the first time business owners have seen the direct one-to-one business impact of somebody as a business insurance professional saying, you're doing such stupid things, we're not going to insure you. Right. Yep. And it's immediately translatable.
Yep. And how would you like to be on that blacklist, right? Of one of the first questions that you get asked in these applications is have you had a claimable breach before? Have you had a cyber incident you've made a claim for? When you say yes to that, the game changes completely. Even if you've like self-corrected, maybe it was no fault of your own to some degree, right? Maybe a user clicked on a phishing email, whatever. But like these are things that change the game a lot. It goes back to your analogy on like the health side. I got super, super sick about 6 years ago and up in the hospital, all this stuff. And I'm telling you, it was 5 years before an insurance company would touch me again after I got mostly healthy again, right? And so it's the same way in cybersecurity. Like you don't want that black eye or that clout hanging over you because it's not going to be good for you in terms of getting insurability again.
It's going to be like, have you had a bankruptcy?
People too that like your insurance carrier is trying to write a policy for an event that is going to happen. We talk about live compromise, we talk about reducing blast radius. It's because we know you're going to experience an incident. Right. It's pretty much a guarantee. You know, there are people that go their whole lives. I'm not one of them, but there are people that drive their whole lives and never get in an accident. Right. There just are. Now, maybe that's a small percentage, but it's a much bigger percentage than the percentage of companies that go a whole life without an incident. Right. Yeah. So I think if you're going in there and you're reducing the blast radius and doing the right things and hopefully following a framework, I'm going to it's a goal. I'm going to say framework in every show. It's going to happen. You're following a framework, saying, hey, we've done everything we can to reduce the blast radius. Maybe that claimable event is there, right? But maybe it was so much smaller than it could have been. And that's your discussion of, hey, yep, this happened. You know, it affected finance, it affected ops. And we were able to confine it because we had our back. We had the CIS controls in place or whatever story you can tell. That's so much better than I got in a car accident after my 5th DUI, right? Like,
and I think you just queued this up for us, Dom. I think just almost perfectly. So, Wes, that's my next question. We've talked a lot about the problem. We've talked a lot about what causes this, what the insurance industry is going through. But one of the things that I think is interesting is the way some of these insurers are trying to solve this. And you and I had a little bit of a prep call about this. But when you have no data, there is a hunger for data that means something. And I won't say exactly all the types of programs I've seen, but can you tell me anything about what Fifth Wall sees in trying to understand more of the data, trying to get to more of the data? What are you seeing in the industry?
Yeah, there's 2 aspects to this. One of those aspects is especially down market with small and mid-sized companies, and then definitely with MSPs, is the first thing is the applications themselves of sort of assessing that client don't necessarily scale down market that well. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
If I talk to any MSP on planet Earth and I say, hey, who's Huntress? And what do? They're going to say, oh, Huntress is an awesome platform. They're like breach detection stuff. They just do some amazing things. But I go to any carrier that's out there, they're going to say, what in the world is a Huntress? I don't know who that is. Where does that fit on this sheet? Right. And so we have a problem where a lot of the products and the processes that we use down market it's not the same as up market. And so there's a gap that exists in how do we actually assess good security on the small and mid-size. It's a problem that needs solving. And so it's a big piece of what Fifth Wall is doing is constantly going back to the carrier and helping them understand, hey, no, here's what this means. Here's why this is good, or here's where the gaps are. And then the second piece though, and I think this is even more important, is measurability. You know, like how do we measure it? You take a look at like the classic analogy is what Allstate, State Farm, the rest of them do. You put that little beacon on your windshield. You know, if you look at, one 40-year-old male that drives a VW compared to another one, across the board, they should be pretty equal in terms of their actuary tables, like how we really see them statistically, but not necessarily, right? What if one just drives like a bat out of hell, is always on their cell phone, never looking? That's where measurability can come in and really say, whoa, there's some things that are not right here. And that's the future of cyber is like, what is and how do we do good measurability when looking at the client? And right now, Matt, and I'll kind of pause on this one, it's not working yet. What we're seeing is measurability. It's like on the outside world, like we'll do a vulnerability scan on your network from the outside world, and then we'll decision based on that. And I'm like, what? That's so horrible. You're not seeing anything. So that's the future of fixing the measurability problem.
Well, and let's talk about this, right? So let's say you're going with Flow and Progressive, and you're going to slap in the little dongle that goes in your car, and it measures engine data, throttle position sensor, how fast you're going, what are the G loads and turns. You know what the difference is? When you plug that plug into a Toyota, a 2014 Toyota, it's a 2014 Toyota. It's known. It has the same variables. It has the same throttle position sensor. It has the same gas sensor. It has all the same stuff. That's the difference in our world. Even if you plugged onto a machine that had this agent, can you really correlate that and all other non-equal factors to be the reason that agent made a difference in the insurability? Right? Because what they're trying to determine is, if I put this sensor on and Wes drives like a grandpa and Matt drives like an idiot, the likelihood is in that same Toyota, Matt's going to get in a wreck. Like, that's the reality of the data they're trying to measure. I think what you're getting at is this problem that we have so many different things with so many different settings that the only way to measure it is to measure it in its totality. And now you're starting to get into, how was it configured? Were those things set? Did the agent, and now you're getting way beyond this external scan to probably needing some data at the endpoint level and at the identity level, at the cloud level. And I'm interested to see how that drives the collectability of a lot of this data and what that does to the market. And the idea would be able to say, well, Wes has his settings set for cloud sensitivity on Microsoft, and Wes is using conditional access, and Wes is also using an EDR product, and Wes also has a SOC as a service. And yes, those were all in place. And yes, you could now start making some empirical delineations around those products. Even if you're making some other rounding decisions on the variables, I feel like you're getting at least a good ability to start separating classes of insureds. And that's similar to what most of the programs I've seen is they're trying to get that data. And I think the question I'd ask you is, where's the line of getting that data and having too much information, too much data, sensitive data, regulatory data, versus, right, how do you handle that? How do you not, as an insurance agency, take on a lot of that risk, but also give yourself access to get that? And I've met a company that's solving this very creatively, but just curious if you'd thought or given any thoughts to that collectability, if you will, of the data.
That is the golden question, Matt. Like, what needs to be solved, because insurance can't, and I would say wouldn't even want to like see everything. I don't want to be the all-seeing eye of Sauron looking over every single client. I mean, that's a huge risk to themselves. You like the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, amen.
There.
How do we do it? Really appreciate it there, Wes. Thank you. That actually made my day. I'm not going to lie to you.
You're welcome.
It's nice we can bring Rob into the fold here.
I was waiting for like that. I was like, I hope someone brings up Lord of the Rings at some point, and you deliver, man. Thank you so
You're
much.
like, in my wheelhouse, bro. Got this one. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I am excited about the Amazon series. We'll see if it's any good. Who knows? Okay. So here's my thoughts on this, and gather my thoughts back again, is we need to see the things that matter. So what are the things that matter? I just would not have believed this until I start doing all these call your baby uglies. If we think, like, I just thought, well, what company doesn't have multi-factor rolled out everywhere? Come on. You'd be surprised a lot of them don't have it rolled out everywhere. And a lot of them that even check the box that are like, yeah, I'm sure we have. Sure. I don't know. That's nerd stuff.
We've got that MFA stuff. Sure.
Yep. And then they get mad when their claim gets denied. And because it's very clear that multi-factor was not enabled, and that's what led to the breach. Can't fault the carrier for that when you did not do what you said. So I think where we start with this is we say, what are the commonalities that lead to the vast majority of breaches? And let's get visibility into that. And if we can do that through read-only API, that's a huge win for us. That way we don't have to see all your data. You can just send to me certain things that the API is saying, yep, it's enabled for these users. Yep, we're doing security awareness training for all these users. Yep, we're doing vulnerability scanning for these network segments, whatever. Maybe reach into Azure and see some things that exist in there. But the key would be read only and the minimal amount that we can see to cover the 80%. We'll never get to the 100%. We don't need to get to the 100%. But if we can get to the 80%, I think we can really see progress here.
It's so good. And the crazy thing is if you're cloud native, pardon the kids, they're going crazy. It's Friday.
It's all right. Their discourse is just as much against this cybersecurity challenge. I agree with them completely.
I even talked to hashtag mood on that one. Yeah. I mean, they're feeling my vibe on that.
No, but if you exist in a cloud native world and you're in Microsoft 365, you're in Azure, the APIs are there, right? The Defender APIs and the identity APIs. It's not hard to tap into those and say, give me a list of users that don't have MFA. If it's greater than 0, raise a red flag, right? These are all totally possible things, and the technology's there. So it would be really cool to see that come to light.
Nailed it. Because you know what we're seeing right now, Dom, is we're seeing a bunch of like witch potion security stuff. And I won't name vendors, but I've
Witch
seen this for the
potion.
longest time of like, oh, your hacker cadence is at level 80.
Ah.
And I'm like, what does that even
Oh,
mean? That
man,
like
what
those
is
words
that?
mean nothing to me. Like, well, we did some like analysis in the dark web and then did some AI kind of stuff that we mixed it together and we determined blah, 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 blah. I'm like, none of that means anything from a decision criteria problem. That's
Right.
got to get fixed.
Amen.
Yeah,
Preach it,
sure.
brother. I'm just going to sit here in awe of that statement for a minute, but 100%.
Witch potion. Yeah, that sounds like a T-shirt. Witch potion security.
I'd buy that.
The other, I would too. Witch potion security. I mean, I think to your point though, that is part of this victimization. I think the insurance company is a victim of these histrionic claims, and what I mean by that is, if I'm somebody like an EDR product and I come out and say stops all threats.
Okay, time out,
right?
Matt. Hold on. We talked about
Okay.
this. You said EDR,
EDR.
product.
But
is
everybody
an
struggle
E-
with EDR.
What is an EDR? Here's your acronym alert. It's time to tell me what
Okay.
EDR is.
Okay, endpoint detection and response. And so an EDR product takes this concept of antivirus. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep it right now. There's going to be a test later. We've already seen it with cameras. But it takes this concept of saying, we know that we're not going to stop everything in at all. And we understand that. And so an EDR's job, or an endpoint detection and response tool, is job. And remember, a lot of these letters are made up as marketing terms initially. But the job is to detect information, gather enough information, and allow you to have context and enriched data so that you can find patterns of threat actor type behavior. Sometimes that's done by like signatures where you've already had this prior data and information and you stop it. Like if I go and run Mimikatz or try to run certain things, they're going to detect it quite easily. But EDR goes further in the sense that it allows.
See, here's the problem, Matt. If you start opening this channel for me here,
Yeah.
I'm going to be like,
it's going to get ugly.
we're going to get stopped every 2 minutes. What's a Mimikat?
I'm good
Explain
with
that
it.
to me.
Mimikatz is a password dumping technology. It's a group of tools essentially that were made to attack and steal credentials. I'm over summarizing, but essentially
stop
it's just a
interrupting you now,
well-known
but-
payload.
Okay, great.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
But yeah, from that perspective is saying that EDR is meant to be able to detect these kind of even living off the land type tools, right? For example, instead of me having to bring malware, bad guy stuff, I'm just going to use command prompt to do stuff in a way that I can take advantage of the system. So EDR
Maybe
helps
over some
detect
kind of
those
RMM
kind of
tool,
attacks.
you know, like
You never know, like one that we've seen in most attacks for MSPs.
yeah, maybe.
And now I'm kind of tangential from where I was on that initial thought, but yeah, no, I got lost. Somebody help me out. Give me a push here, y'all.
I'm sorry, you were
Forgot where I was
referencing EDRs and I stopped you.
I'm not sure where I was. If anybody wants to make fun of me for it,
well,
later,
it's
totally
a
fine.
move really into like understanding what something's doing and is that okay, right? Like, why are you hooking in a credential manager? That doesn't make any. Oh, you're not assigned process. That doesn't make any sense either. Maybe we should stop this, right? But circling back to the insurance applicability of having an EDR, right, and having it deployed in a useful way, not in learning mode, right? Is a lot of what this comes down to. And back to the API conversation, most of these vendors provide APIs that'll tell you what machines are out of date, right? And you'll report on that.
I remember where I was going with this, y'all. So one of the things that Wes triggered me on was, it got me back full circle, was MFA and is it applied and a way to detect that potentially at the identity layer. But more importantly, through day-to-day operations, sometimes MFA is disabled for a purpose of troubleshooting. Sometimes those things are bypassed in our day-to-day lives. And I think back to Wes's point, you as the MSP, when you're turning off that MFA protection, have some risk acceptance that's happening there of saying, I'm taking away one of the key protections that you've told your insurer that you have. And so now as an MSP, you have to be mature enough to be able to deal with that and have checks and balances. And I think what to Wes's point is that insurers may start building that themselves. They may start saying, we noticed that 15 times during this month, 2 employees were left without MFA coverage. We're now going to either rate you, right? Because that's what a rider is on insurance, or a rate ad on insurance is. We're going to rate you higher than your class of insurance, which means more money, right? Or we're going to drop you, or we may not pay a claim. And you can see a lot of these things coming out as a somewhat of a shared insurability model that's similar to everything else we've already seen. Right? If you're going to drive your car like an idiot, you need to understand that there may be some loss mitigation clauses that come in. I might end up suing you for subrogation because you created this challenge or loss. If Toyota all of a sudden had a bad 2014 that they didn't deal with, part problem that created a bunch of risk and a lot of loss, they're going to go after them and subrogate that loss to Toyota for not solving that problem. And that's the other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, Wes, before we wrap this up, because we're running out of time here, is do you see a world where insurance tries to claw back through subrogation, through other models, even after they've paid your client, right? Imagine a scenario where they've paid my client for their insured event, and now they sue me as an MSP for saying they had MFA when they didn't. Is that also something you've either seen or heard or believe could be happening in the future in the insurance industry?
I mean, this can get muddy, right? And keep in mind, I'm still new to Fifth Wall,
Sure.
and so still getting into the groundwork of what's happening. But I do think overall, I mean, the forensic aftermath certainly is where we see what exactly happened, how did it happen, who's at fault, and there's no doubt this stuff gets sticky, especially if you have service providers in the middle of this, like an MSP, or you're working with third-party vendors that are maybe storing your data. Like, where does the fault actually lie? And yeah, so this, to your point, Matt, I think it can get sticky with subrogation. It can get sticky with, after the incident, whoa, hey, we're not going to pay out this and this and this because of what we see in the data from all of this. And so I do think it leads to probably this thought is if you're a business owner today or an MSP, you need to understand your insurance. And if you're talking to your clients need to understand where they're at. They need to understand where their limits are. They need to understand all of the intricacies. They cannot survive anymore with just assuming that their agent put together good insurance. 99% of agents, they don't know anything about cybersecurity. And so it's not that the agent is doing the wrong thing. It's that they don't typically understand the nature and scope of breaches, how much coverage you need, where your limits may be. So I think the era has come where every MSP needs to engage every client in their insurance, and they don't have to be the expert, but they definitely need to get involved in the conversation.
And the coolest ancillary benefit out of that is if you go have a insurance review with your clients and make sure they understand it, partner with an agent, partner with your agent, partner with their agent. If you go have that review, you'll drive the sales and the processes and the things you've been trying to get your client to adopt from a security perspective. Like it's sweet irony in that. So
100%.
That's sage advice. Dom, any closing thoughts on the insurance markets and where we're at? And we'll kick it back over to Rob to close us out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Fifth Wall does and sort of where this journey goes, because it's, I compared it to home insurance. I didn't have an insurance agent until I bought a house, because like car insurance is car insurance. Like I got this much liability and this much medical, whatever. Then I went to go shopping for home insurance, and I was like, holy crap, there's like 400 different things I could buy, and I needed an agent. But that market's been around for however long, 100 years. We understand how home insurance works, and we know the weather patterns in the city and I live, and blah, 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 blah. So until the market is mature enough where we have agents that understand what cybersecurity is, and maybe more so it's outside advisors who help agents understand what cybersecurity is on a case-by-case basis, we'll never get there. So I really like what's happening here, and I'm super excited to see this particular piece of the insurance industry mature, because it's so critical, right? I said it, as a business owner, I want to insure every possible loss I can insure that's insurable. And hopefully get to a stage where that's everything except for, not being able to sell or something. So thanks for coming to Wes. This was great. It's a really important conversation. And I'm glad we're having it. I'm glad to see that, we're making progress, we're at least tiptoeing forward.
And most of all, thank you for being such a warrior, Wes, and showing up even with, the slight cough.
For real.
And the muting problems, but we won't talk about those. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Wes. Matt, Dom, always wonderful. I'm just going to close this out by saying, please, please, please like, subscribe, and comment below. We're here every Friday at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I believe that if I'm doing math right, that's 4 p.m.
Or
EST.
1:59 and 30 seconds, right? I mean, sometimes 1:59 and 30
okay.
seconds.
Look, you don't have to just put me, on the spot there. A bunch of buttons being pushed over. I always tell you, there's a lot of buttons. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us here at the game. We're going to wrap it up. We will see you next week live. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Okay.